Perfect. Good evening. Can you hear me in the back of the room? Tracy, can you hear me? Everybody good in the back? Perfect. I'm going to attempt to try to slide this a little bit this direction before we get started. Nope, that's not a go. So don't touch the microphone. All right, we'll start with leaving the microphone as it is right there. That is perfect. Welcome to our Paid to Park Town Hall meeting on this lovely Tuesday, rainy, cold evening here on March the 28th, 2023. I am Shane Fox, the town manager. This is Aaron Miller, our police chief. Give me thumbs up if you can hear and everything's good in the back. I'm hearing some feedback.
Yeah, you might have to look just a tiny.
Perfect. Perfect. There we go. All right, so let's get started officially now that we've got the microphone taken care of. Welcome to the town hall meeting for our Paid to Park here on March 28th, 2023. We are live streaming this and we do have a number of folks watching. It will be recorded on our YouTube channel. So if you've ever watched our town council meetings, same premise there within our YouTube channel. So you can go back and watch this. Tonight's meeting will be conducted by myself, again, Shane Fox, the town manager, Aaron Miller, our police chief. We're acting as both presenters and facilitators tonight. Outline of tonight will consist of me starting by giving a few slides and some overviews of why are we here, why are we talking about paid parking, and then give a little bit of some feedback or a little bit of background information to how we got here tonight. I'll provide some housekeeping rules of kind of the layout of tonight and how tonight's going to work with some thoughts towards the Q&A session that's going to be at the end. After I give the housekeeping rules, Chief Miller will come up and do an overview of what we're calling our Paid to Park proposal. We've done this now a few times, but he'll give him a chance and you all a chance to see the facts as they've been presented to the town council with regards to Paid to Park. And then at the final segment of tonight will be a question and answer and feedback session for you all. So if you'll allow us to kind of go through the presentation, and maybe there's some questions you have that we'll be able to answer as we go through, and then maybe develop more questions as we go through each one of the presentations tonight. So let me start by first introducing our town council members. All 5 council members and the mayor are here tonight. If you would, please stand up so everybody can see who you are. So we've got David Harwood here to the front left, Pete Girini on the left behind him, Melissa Pickett is in the back far left, Doug Matheson is beside of her, beside of Lieutenant Kirk. Mayor Sellers is in the very back of the room, and Albert Jan is here in the red jacket to the right. So we appreciate not only the town council coming tonight, appreciate the interest in paid parking. So something that we've been talking about for a while, and I'll give you a little feedback at just how long we've been talking about this particular topic. So I'll start by why are we here tonight? Blowing Rock was founded in 1889. It's been a tourist destination resort town even before 1889. We have a great number of seasonal residents here and a great number of visitors. That has always been the case. It has been that way for over 100 years. The invention of the automobile and the number of folks that started coming here in the 30s and 40s was probably the first time parking and issues with parking was first discovered. TDA Director Tracy Brown shared a video with me last week from 1958. I couldn't get that video here tonight to play, but Main Street was packed in 1958. So I think the town of Blowing Rock's been talking about parking well before tonight. So interesting enough, I think we've always had some parking issues. COVID, however, in our opinion, has put a spotlight on parking. June 2020, when the floodgates essentially opened up, and I think everyone who had desired to get out of their house, who had been dealing with COVID restrictions, wanted to flood to the mountains and get out and breathe fresh air and be a part of what we have to offer and why a lot of us are here, which is the beauty and the unbelievable, unmatched nature opportunities we have. We saw COVID really spike and really put a spotlight on our parking here, especially, like I said, 2020 and 2021. Main Street became a floodgate, so to speak, of cars, of individuals coming into the parkway and enjoying what we all enjoy here, or have a chance to enjoy, which is the outdoor area. Parking has really now become a year-round issue. There are very few off days I would consider, especially weekends. Our weekends, everyone that's a part of the town and been a part of the town for a number of years have seen that growth, especially on the weekend. So we used to have what I would call shoulder seasons or off seasons. That's not really the case anymore. Parking is pretty much a year-round issue, especially Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So retreat priority. So the town council every year has a multi-day retreat. I went back to 2005, and just about every year since 2005, parking has been discussed. And we've got some members of town council, former mayors in attendance here, that can probably nod their head in agreement with this. Parking has been discussed at least on a formality, in a formal sense, since at least 2005 with the town council. Since I've been here, which is 2019 into 2020, we've had 9 different public meetings, including retreats, including summer retreats and winter retreats, and some individual paid parking meetings, just discussing parking. 2020 and 2021, the TDA hired Roger Brooks International to come to town and conduct a tourism sustainability study. And so if many of you were around during that time, you remember Roger came in June of 2021 and spent a month here. And so Roger Brooks, if you haven't looked him up, has a unbelievable 40-year track record as a tourism expert, has been all over the world, has conducted, I think, over 300 studies, and that number may be low, but a number of studies all about tourism and tourism towns, resort destination towns like Blowing Rock. He was here again in 2021 during June and July, which is primarily our peak season, or one of our 2 peak seasons, including the fall and our leaf season, and concluded from his study while he was here during the summer into the fall that we didn't really have an over-tourism issue. We had a parking issue, a lack of parking, lack of turnover, a logistical parking issue. His study is available on our website. It's available on the TDO website if you haven't had a chance to see that. It's a fascinating study that goes all into all things Blowing Rock and tourism and gives some really great suggestions. But some of his tourism suggestions that he gave was that we need more parking, and we need to do a better job of managing the parking that we have now, especially our on-street parking, Main Street, Sunset, Park Avenue, etc. Why else are we here tonight? So that's a little background that kind of gets us up to speed a little bit on just some of the parking issues that we've talked about in a number of years. Main focus on tonight, the next 2 slides deal with, is to provide the facts about the paid parking proposal. So you may not have had a chance to be at one of the 9 meetings that we've shared this parking proposal over the last couple of years. Tonight, we'll have a chance for you to hear from Chief Miller and he'll give you the facts behind what's being proposed to Town Council. I will make a note, Town Council has not voted on this formally. What they voted on was to move us to tonight, which is a chance for you all to come and hear and ask questions and get some answers. We do have scheduled on the April 11th Town Council meeting for this to be discussed. That doesn't mean they will vote on it that night, but we do have to provide public notice. So I did hear some things out in the community that the Town Council has already voted on this. That's not true. We've not voted on paid parking. That's yet to come if council wants to move forward with it. As of right now, it is on the schedule for the April 11th Town Council meeting. That could change. Again, it's up to the Town Council. We have provided that public notice to allow for that to be on the Town Council agenda if they choose to move forward with that. Again, Town Council is here tonight. They are not participating. They're here as observers. That's what Aaron and myself, Chief Miller and myself, are doing tonight, is facilitating this meeting and allowing them to hear some feedback. So to allow the question and answer and to gather feedback, as I was saying, something that has happened over the course of these 9 meetings, our parking proposal has changed. There's been a number of things that we've changed as we've gathered feedback from the public. Council's provided that feedback as well. So there's some things tonight that you may hear, if you heard maybe the first time it was presented, that's changed a little bit. I think that tells the importance of what the Town Council, myself and Chief Miller feel like are some of the greatest aspects and attributes of this town, is for you all to provide that feedback. So we know some of the answers, and maybe we can look for some solutions to some of those questions that you have. So your feedback is important, and we do want to hear your feedback. And that, again, is one of the primary focuses or purposes of tonight. Getting into this housekeeping for Q&A, and then I'm going to turn it over to Chief Miller for the parking proposal. Number one, if you're going to speak, if you would, state your name and address. That's a typical kind of thing that we do at our Town Council meeting. Also allows us to have a recording of it for those that are watching, and for us to go back and hear and have an official record of the meeting tonight. We are going to have respectful dialogue. I don't think anybody in the room expects anything different. Respectful of time and others. If you're going to speak, please try to limit your time and allow others to speak. We do have a good full crowd tonight of individuals, and so we appreciate you just kind of limiting your comments to a constructive amount of the feedback. And again, constructive feedback is really what we're here for. We're here tonight to try to gather as much constructive feedback as we can as we move forward with a very important topic, which is paid parking. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to our police chief, Aaron Miller, who's going to come up and go through the paid parking proposal.
I'm afraid to touch the mic, but it's a little above my head. Trying to do the best I can, so. Let's just leave it alone, I'll step back. Thank you, Shane, that was a good introduction. Again, we've been talking about pay to park for quite a while. I know that I've been working full-time for the town for 15 years. It's been an ongoing topic. Town council, I know, has looked into pay to park plans multiple times over the years. So we're still talking about the same parking problem. In those 15 years that I've been working for the town full-time, and I've been in Blowing Rock, I'm from Blowing Rock, so I've been here almost 55 years. But in the 15 years I've worked here full-time, the two things that I've heard over and over again is that we don't have enough parking, and that we're not turning over parking spaces on Main Street for our merchants frequently enough. So those are two of the primary complaints that I hear. So as Shane alluded to, in 2020, at the end of 2021 and into January 2022, Roger Brooks presented his Sustainable Tourism Management Plan. So Mr. Brooks was hired by the TDA. During that period of time, during those COVID years and maybe even a year or two leading up to COVID, we started to have a perception in town that we had a over-tourism problem. We had too many tourists. We weren't able to manage the numbers that we saw coming into town. So I think that was one of the primary reasons that led to the TDA hiring Mr. Brooks to come in, do a study, see what's going on, see what we can do to better manage our tourism. So this was the focus of his plan, to see what we could do to better manage our tourism and mitigate any issues that we had from the visitors that were coming into town. So this was one of the key takeaways, and Mr. Brooks stated this over and over again and highlighted this issue. He said, Blowing Rock doesn't have a tourism problem, we have a parking problem. And I think that's right. One of the things he did that was interesting is he went and spent some time sitting on one of the park benches. If I put my hand on that, it stops. Sitting on one of the park benches in Memorial Park on Main Street. And he picked out a car that was unique that he could pick out over and over again. And I think what he concluded was the average visitor coming into town was circling Main Street about 4 times before they stopped circling because they gave up or they eventually found a parking space. So the parking, it's not just a problem for the parking, but it's a problem with our traffic congestion as well in town, because we have the same cars circling and circling trying to find spots. So what can we do about that? Mr. Brooks said that in his estimation, we needed 1,500 parking spaces, that we needed no less than 600 additional parking spaces than what we have now. So that's a large number. So how much would it cost to build this parking? So we have some estimates that have been done. The town, as you may know, have purchased a couple of pieces of property out on 321. One of those pieces of property is beside the fire station on 321. So the engineer for the town took a look, did some rough estimates on how much it would cost to build some remote parking there on that piece of property. And you can see the numbers. The surface lot with only 95 spaces is almost $1 million. So that's a lot of money. Of course, a parking structure, 200 spaces, $13 million. It's a lot of money. So where's the money going to come from if we decide to move forward with building this additional parking that we need? So there's basically 3 ways that we can raise revenue in the town of Blowing Rock to pay for parking. We can raise the property taxes on all the residents that live here and all the people who own property. We can create a downtown development tax, which has been discussed over the years, that would just affect our downtown business district. Or we can implement a pay-to-park system that's paid so that all the users of the park can help pay for the parking. So that's one way that's really the only method that we have to help get our visitors to help pay for the cost of this additional parking is a pay-to-park. All the other options that we have for raising revenue in town fall on the property owners and their property tax bill. So we were asked to take a look at the pay-to-park system, see if it was feasible. So these are the folks that a pay-to-park system are going to affect. You know, everybody in this room, whether you're a resident, business owner, there are churches, our visitors, our town departments and staff, and our other organizations that use parking in town. So the first thing that we did following the town council retreat in January 2022 was we formed a parking advisory committee. You can see all of the groups that were represented. It was a large committee. It was about 17 people on the committee. A couple of residents, a couple of business owners, the Chamber of Commerce was represented. You can see the list. We tried to include all of our stakeholders in this original committee that we set up. So the committee has had several meetings. These were some of the issues that we talked about: days and times for paid parking, parking rates, overtime fines, payment methods, resident parking rates, timeline for implementation, the impact on private parking lots, business employee parking areas and rates, and on-street time limits. And the main question that we wanted to answer at the end of our committee work was, is a pay-to-park plan feasible for the town of Blowing Rock? So the committee overwhelmingly decided that the pay-to-park plan was feasible for Blowing Rock and probably a good option. There were some dissenting opinions, but overwhelming majority were in agreement with the pay-to-park plan. Here were some of the benefits from pay-to-park. Provides a consistent way to accomplish the goals of the town. And one of those primary goals that we have had for some time, is to turn over the parking that we have on street, on Main Street, so that the merchants have they have opportunity to see more customers coming in and out of their business. It's a fair and equitable use of parking, provides opportunities for public-private partnerships. That's real important, and I'll circle back to that later on. But these public-private partnerships, if it's successful, would allow us to leverage some parking spaces that are not utilized most of the week in our town that we might could utilize for visitor parking. And at the bottom, generate revenues that are shared by our visitors to pay for the much needed additional parking. So these were the major recommendations of the parking committee: that yes, we should implement pay to park, that the parking enforcement times would be 9 a.m. in the morning until 5 p.m. in the evening, except on Sundays. We know that we have 2 or 3 churches on Main Street down in the same area. The church membership depends on our town parking spaces on Sunday mornings. So it was decided that it would be best not to start any kind of parking enforcement until 1 p.m. in the evening. The committee also recommended that we reserve a few spaces in the Maple Street parking lot for residents only. It would not be free. It would just be residents only, so that some of the residents would be able to find parking. They'd still have to pay the fee, but they would be able to find parking. Here are some of the plan recommendations that we came out with. On-street parking, which includes Main Street, Jenny Stevens Lane, Sunset Drive, Wallingford. 2 hours, $2 per hour for the first 3 hours, $4 per hour after 3 hours. So there's a reason for the change. I get letters all the time. The mayor, I know, gets letters. I know that our town manager gets letters. People do not like to shop in your businesses and come outside and find a parking citation on their windshield. They hate that. And they send me letters all the time telling me that they're never coming back to Blowing Rock. That's the way every letter ends. Am I right, Mayor? So we felt like in order to turn those parking spaces over and the time period that we wanted them turned over, that we would try to regulate that by money rather than a citation when we could. So if the cost goes up, to try to encourage people to turn those parking spaces over on Main Street, Sunset Drive, and those areas so that we can cycle in a new group of customers for our merchants. So that was the thought process behind that. Their parking deck rate or off-street parking rate was $1.50 an hour. One thing that we wanted to try to do with our parking rates, once again, was to use finances as a way to incentivize people to move to our underused parking areas. So we want to keep Main Street open for customers. We want the parking decks to be used next for our customers, and we have some underutilized parking areas like the Devant baseball field that there's hardly nobody parked in. Even sometimes on some busy days, there's a lot of empty parking spaces. So we wanted to try to use the financial advantages to try to incentivize people to move out to those underutilized parking areas. So one of the recommendations was that we would always keep some parking area somewhere that was free for those people who just maybe can't afford to pay, and particularly for our merchants and their employees who work in town, to make sure that they had a place to park that was free of charge. So the Devant field lot, we decided should be the lot that remained free. And again, if some additional remote parking is built out in the future, we reevaluate this and decide where the free parking should be. Here were some of the, we did some revenue projections. Now I'm gonna talk a little bit about revenue projections. It's very difficult. We haven't had, I think we did have some meters at one time, way back in the day, but we haven't had paid parking before, essentially. So we have a hard time trying to figure out what the revenue projections would be. So the only way to come up with that was to take the occupancy rates that the TDA provides for the occupancy of their hotels and motel rooms. We used that data to anticipate that our parking spaces would probably be used the same percentage of time. For example, in March, the hotel motels have a 40% occupancy rate. In July, they have a 90% occupancy rate. We used those percentages to try to do some math and calculate how much revenue that we felt like would be realistic. We did a couple of revenue projections. One of the financial consulting companies that the town does business with also looked at the numbers and did a revenue projection. The lowest revenue projection was about $1.2 million. So how would we pay to park, and how would the system work? So there's kind of three, we don't want meters, so let me just dispel that myth right away. There are not going to be individual space parking meters in Blowing Rock. That will not ever happen. So the ways that you regulate parking are with parking meters, individual space. You can have a system much like Boone, if you're familiar with Boone's Queen Street parking area. You go to the machine and you have to pull a ticket and carry it back to your car. We felt like that's inconvenient, not very reasonable. So one of the other systems that we felt like we could use would be an app on your smartphone. That's the future. That's what most cities, most towns, most places are doing, is smartphone apps. How many of you have parked before somewhere else using a smartphone app? So there's several hands going up. So if you're not familiar with that, I have got just a little quick video that shows it's simple. I'll talk some more about it, but it's a very simple process, very simple to put on your phone. And it's done. That's it. That's how long it takes in real time to pay for your parking session. This is Passport Parking. We've identified them as one of the companies that we believe would be able to provide us with the best system. Yeah, we can exit out of that. So Raleigh uses Passport. I was in Raleigh. I had a new cell phone, so I didn't have my Passport app in my new cell phone. So I timed myself to see how long it would take me to download the smartphone app and pay for my parking session. And without the app being loaded on my phone, it took me less than 2 minutes. With the app loaded on the phone, it usually takes most people 30 seconds or less to pay for their parking session. So we would have zone numbers in town. There would be signs with a designated zone number. You pull up, you enter your zone number, tell the app how long you want to park. Do you want to park for 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever? Hit the OK key, and your parking session is paid for. These smartphone apps, they also send you reminders that your session is about to expire. You can add additional time from your app without having to go back to a parking meter or any of those kinds of things. So we felt like this pay by app was probably the best system. Now, there are some people who don't have smartphones. There are some people who just like to pay cash, and that's okay. So we wanted to also have an option that didn't require a smartphone to pay, and that option would be a multi-space pay station. These are really small. There's different companies. Most of them look the same. This is a Flowbird multi-space pay station that we're looking at. It's cellular. It's LTE. It's a cellular. It works off the cellular network, so there's no wires, no cables, no installation costs. It's basically plug and play. But these will accept coin and credit card. So for those folks that just don't want to use a smartphone, there's another option available. These are real small. We anticipate needing on Main Street and in the parking decks and parking lots about 12 of these total. So the thought process is we're going to scatter them pretty far and wide. We are going to make them available, but they're going to be far and wide, so we're not going to have very many. And they don't take up much space at all. So that's the multi-space pay station. Again, you enter your license plate number into this system, enter your zone number, and you pay for your parking session. So these are the two methods that we've identified that would probably work best in Blowing Rock for a pay-to-park system. During the course of presenting this parking plan and hearing feedback, like Shane alluded to, there's been some suggestions made to us that we might want to propose. Again, this is all just a proposal that we're proposing to council. Nothing's been finalized. But one of the concerns were that residents might need, they might have a quick trip. Maybe you're running into town hall to pay your water bill, for example, and you're only going to be in there for 5 minutes. So one of the recommendations is that the first 30 minutes of your parking session be free. And that would accommodate all of those folks that have short trips, just need to run in and out. You would still have to go through the payment process, but you wouldn't actually have to pay money for that first 30-minute parking session. Another suggestion that's come back to us is that we provide some monthly or annual permits for business owners or their employees. So that's something that we're exploring currently to see how that would work. We have looked at enforcement software that does provide us with a permitting application so that we can issue permits for different things in town. So we already have that as part of our plan, but this is one of the suggestions that's come back to us that we consider. We looked at updating our parking fees and our overtime fines. They haven't been updated in a long time. Overtime citation in Blowing Rock is $10. It's been $10 for 20 years at least. We're way behind where most places are. Somewhere we were just looking at that implemented a parking system, was at Hendersonville, that had your first time overtime parking fine was $50. So they're pretty serious about it. Hendersonville just went to a pay-to-park system here in the last few weeks. We had a graduated system to update that a little bit. So that's a quick overview of the plan and how it would work. And I know that's quick, but now we'll go into questions and try to give you some answers to any questions that you have.
And I was going to add just a couple things that we didn't put in here, but it's been discussed previously. So unlike some other towns, we are planning on keeping this in-house if the council does choose to move forward with it. So from an enforcement, from a monitoring standpoint, we will keep this in-house if council chooses to move forward with it. So it will be under the purview of our police chief. So a lot of places have gone through the process, and some still do it today, of farming this out or contracting this out. We feel like because of our destination being a tourist and resort town and the fact that we are a small town, we have a better opportunity to control that by keeping that in-house and knowing, our clients and our individuals that we're dealing with much better than that. So I wanted to add that as well to this. So we are planning on proposing this to town council, keeping this in-house from an enforcement standpoint, from all the administrative services as well, keeping this within the purview of our police chief and the police department. So at this time, going kind of back to the original housekeeping slide that I had up there, we are looking for any questions you have, and we'll try to give you some answers, looking for feedback, constructive feedback. We don't have a microphone back this direction, so if you have questions, I'm going to repeat those back into the microphone, so we'll have a chance to have that as part of the recording for individuals at home as well. So we'll just kind of keep this as low-key and as informal as possible. Raise your hand if you've got a question, and we'll be more than happy to try to answer that for you. And again, as council members in the audience that are gathering the feedback. So we'll start with who has a question. We'll start here on the front row. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Kelly Graver. I'm at 101 Clary Court. I noticed that you had three choices how to pay for it. One was that the merchants would have to pay for it, and the third choice was only where the tourists would be paying for it while we would share. But have y'all considered charging an extra tax for all sales or food sales in restaurants here instead of doing paid parking and additional sales tax?
Yeah, great question. I'll repeat it back. So the question was, have we considered charging additional sales tax or additional taxes outside of the parking proposal that's here? That would essentially be passed along to individuals that are dining in restaurants and retail. Is that a fair question? The answer to that, so we do not have the opportunity from a town perspective to provide or add additional tax. So we can provide and add a property tax rate. So that's what town council set. Everything else is through the county. So the Watauga County commissioners are charged with any additional taxation that has to be put into place. And if it's additional sales tax, that has to actually go through a referendum, a vote. And Watauga County did that a number of years ago, and that was actually voted down. So we don't really have the ability to add additional taxation right now outside of our 6% that we do for our heads and beds. So no additional sales tax unless the county were to move forward with some opportunities there. The town cannot pursue that from additional taxation. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Suzanne Stevens. I'm going to be a new merchant down the road here and formerly over at the Tanger. My question has to do with really maybe the employees and the parking. I love that idea they have at the Devant Field. I guess what I'm trying to understand from the report, from the study, how would we make good neighborly efforts if we have, let's say, 4 employees? Because he did mention in the report that that is a big significant number of spots. And those individuals stay in those spots all day. So was there any feedback or answers to that to help be neighborly and have our employees not have those spots?
So we recently sent an officer around to try to poll the merchants to find out how many merchants had parking spaces that they own and how many don't. I think the results of that were about 35 merchants in the downtown area depended either solely on town of Blowing Rock parking spaces or partially. A lot of merchants have 1 or 2 parking spaces, but maybe not enough to accommodate 3 or 4. So we think we're not talking about that many parking spaces. I think there's about 60 to 70 parking spaces at Devant Field. So we feel like that'd be adequate. If it's not, then we can take a look and maybe revise the plan. We know beyond any shadow of a doubt that there's going to be revisions and tweaks and updates that are going to have to be made to any proposal that we come out with. We've never done this before. So as we go along, I'm quite sure that we're going to see things that maybe work and maybe some things that don't work as well, and we're going to need to revisit that. But we do feel like there'll be enough spaces at Devant Field to handle those 35 merchants.
Will there be transportation or will that be a walkable scenario, being that I'm still getting adjusted to the walkabout for employees and so forth?
So walkable, I guess, it kind of depends on your perspective, right? So, I can tell you that it's about 5 city blocks, normal size city blocks, to get from Main Street to the Devant Field. We are going to be working over the summer to improve the walkway, the visibility, hopefully improve the lighting. We're working on some other safety measures for that parking lot, like installation of some cameras, building out some Wi-Fi, installation of some cameras to make sure that it's secure for employees to go. It is a little far for some, maybe not others.
Was there discussion on transportation, Chief, at all
So
with the committee?
we have discussed, so we've had a shuttle that has ran during the summer months before, and it's a Friday and Saturday shuttle. It's through the Apple Cart system which is located in Boone. Part of the discussion with Roger Brooks was to put in a full-time shuttle. That is something that we have discussed. Again, there's a cost factor within that. Some of the parking fees and the parking revenue that would be generated could pay for a shuttle. If we were to do that, we feel like we would need to do that on a very consistent basis. Apple Cart didn't allow us to have that on a consistent basis. So if we were to do it, again, council would decide to move forward with that. We would have to have that in-house and do that on a very consistent basis. That's in discussions as well. We've discussed a shuttle system for as long as we've discussed the parking as being a potential there. Costly endeavor if you do it right, and you have to. And that was one of the recommendations that Roger Brooks provided. If you do a shuttle, it needs to be a very consistent shuttle. Every 15 minutes, it needs to have, clear signage, clear communication, free, of course. And so I think that is something that very well may come from this discussion as we get into, the full proposal.
Will you talk just a second about the parking fund and where the revenues would go?
The question from Chief was talking about the revenue of parking, from the parking revenue generated, what that would look like and what's allowed. So North Carolina is a wonderful state from a overview. LGC, Local Government Commission, provides great insight and overview of all things government related financing. So there is a state statute that all revenue that's generated from on-street parking, so that's our $2 parking proposal, all that revenue has to be used to offset parking expenses. So that's enforcement, that may be shuttle, that may be anything that we're looking at that's parking related. So that revenue has to go into a separate pot of money that's utilized just for parking cost. It has to be used to offset parking cost. Our off-street parking, our parking decks, our Maple Street parking, our pool parking lot, that money can be used for capital, so parking capital, so future capital needs, debt service. So if we were to build a parking structure and take out an installment loan, it would be able, those monies would be able to be used to offset those costs. If you are to generate any type of revenue from a private partnership with a town, so a revenue sharing type of generation of parking fees. So for instance, if we were to partner with the Wells Fargo lot, for instance, and we had some enforcement opportunity to provide and we collected revenue, that money has a little bit of more of an ability to be shared within the general fund. Parking fees in North Carolina are supposed to stay within parking is the goal there. So if you're on street, it's absolutely set by general statute, has to be used to offset parking cost. If it's off street, parking decks, our surface lots, that can be used for capital. And that would be our intention. Everything that we've discussed since I've been here has been towards putting parking revenue back into parking, further enhancing the current parking we have, adding additional parking, which is where this conversation began with Roger Brooks.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle Pupil. I live off of Rickard, and I am a Floyd Rock school parent.
Yes.
And so my question is kind of related more towards that. Not opposed to paid parking. I understand the logistics. I understand the draw from a financial perspective. Also understand that this is moving forward probably a lot more quickly than everybody understands. But my question is that, so, and like you addressed it a little bit with the 30-minute free option as a suggestion, is that you have a lot of parents who park on Sunset in the Meadowbrook lot, in the church parking lot, all up and down to come and pick up their kids because Carline is almost inaccessible. It can take upwards of 45 minutes to sit through Carline, depending on when you get there. But it's also a sense of community, that these parents are creating community because they're coming in and they're talking and they're letting their kids play. Especially now that spring's coming, you have hundreds of kids that are out there playing in the afternoon, and it's a sense of community. And so how are you going to continue to foster that? The second part of my question is, how are you going to keep our parking lots safe, the Rolling Lock school lot? And how are you going to make sure that we don't have visitors parking in that lot during the day? And on weekends when there's school events and that sort of thing, because it's a free lot. I'm assuming you're not gonna charge for that lot and it's not gonna be gated. So how do you keep visitors from being like, there's a spot, I'm just gonna sneak in, nobody's gonna notice. Because that's gonna happen, but then you have people who are not familiar and we don't have tracking on. And so like, what does that look like for our students and keeping our students safe? But also for our teachers, because a lot of our teachers can't get in the parking lot in the morning because the parking lot is really inaccessible when car line is moving through it. So you have teachers who are coming in that are parking on Sunset in the morning until they can get back out at lunchtime to move their cars. Where do they park? Because they can't get in, they're gonna be late for school. And so like, what does that look like and what is gonna be done to kind of address that? To make sure that our community still has access to the things that we need, but also to build community and to maintain this like sense of connection where, especially since you're drawing in the younger crowd, one of the things, the tenets that Blowing Rock has kind of been going for is to bring in a younger community. And so how do you continue to foster that?
So I will not try to repeat that question. Other than to state all things school related. So I understand your question. So I will make the statement, not that it makes me better. I've had 2 children go through Blowing Rock, a third that's there now, and a wife that's there daily teaching. So I understand all the things that you're speaking towards. The school parking lot, like our private lots, have had issues for years at maintaining and keeping visitors and others out of the parking lot. So that's still there. That's there today. And that's going to be there regardless if we do paid parking. So if you go down to the school in any, Tuesday or Thursday or Friday afternoon, you'll see people parking there to go shop downtown. That's something you see on a daily basis. So I understand fully where you're coming from. Our goal would be if we could provide some partnership to the school to allow us to help enforce that. Signage is going to be key. And enforcement is going to be key. Right now, there is no enforcement that's going on at the school outside of the school system itself. And there's, pointing here towards the right here at some school employees, and I shouldn't do that and put them on the spot. But I'm pointing and saying, yeah, there are issues right now with lack of enforcement at the school parking lot. So the 30 minutes, we did think that would allow for some flexibility if folks were stopping and parking on Sunset or parking on one of our private or public lots to pick up their kids. Outside of that, we have not discussed in full with the school system. We have shown this to the superintendent and had a conversation with the superintendent about if it was an opportunity to do some type of partner. There's some issues at the state level, I think, with revenue being generated from that parking lot. But that is something that we do need to continue to try to provide that conversation or have that conversation with the school superintendent of whether or not we could partner with them and potentially provide some enforcement. I'll ask Chief Miller if he's got any suggestions or thoughts. I know he's had some conversations as well with the school.
Well, I will circle back and generally speak about public-private partnerships. So one of the key things that we wanted to have in place before we implemented any kind of pay to park was a plan to deal with private parking lots. We know that if we charge for parking on the on-street or off-street parking lots in Blowing Rock, we know that's going to put pressure on private parking lots because they're free. So we have a plan that we can, and it's totally up to the owners, the organization that owns that parking lot, whether they want to partner with us or not. But if they choose to partner with us, we have a plan that we will help them with their enforcement. We will collect revenues from their parking. They will get all the revenues from their parking lot minus a percentage to help cover the administrative and the enforcement cost of doing that enforcement. The percentage number that we're looking at right now is about 20%. So they would get the revenue from their parking lot minus 20% for our enforcement efforts and management efforts. So the parking lot is very unique. It's not an easy one to manage. I think Shane is right about the signage. And that's a difficult parking lot. The other parking lots you mentioned are all private parking lots. We have zero control over those parking lots now, the Meadowbrook and these other places. So if they would like to come on board, partner with the town, that would allow us to go in and do some enforcement, help them manage their parking. Circle back to the school teachers just a second, and I hope my neighbor is not streaming this. My neighbor is a retired school teacher. She paid her parking tickets monthly. There were a lot. You're not permitted now to park on Sunset Drive and leave your car for more than 3 hours. That's already not permitted. So we're not changing that. It's not permitted now. It won't be permitted going forward. And unfortunately, some of the teachers do get citations from time to time.
And I would add, so our goal is to partner with these private lots. We don't want everyone out necessarily doing their own thing. We can't control that if we go to a pay-to-park system. We have a parking lot in town that has put up signs recently. Again, that is a private lot that the town has no say-so. We would like to have a very consistent process. So when you come to town, especially if you're a first-time visitor, if you're a multi-time visitor here, that you have consistent signage, consistent pricing, consistent phone numbers and information there that's provided that you can call if you've got questions. That's the goal. We don't want to necessarily have everyone doing something different. Even though we can't control that, we are asking. In return, what we're offering is enforcement. And so that is something that is difficult if you don't have someone there or a gate system of some sorts to provide that enforcement. It's going to be difficult for some of these private lots to provide that enforcement. We are offering that through our tag reading system, which is what's being proposed here. We'll do that for you as part of that process and that partnership. But if you don't and you do something on your own, if you own a private lot, that is unfortunately not something that we can control. And we definitely will not be participating in the enforcement side of that. Again, the school is right. Chief Miller is very much correct. The school is a unique situation that we love to have right here in the heart of town. It is absolutely wonderful to have the school here, but it does provide some challenges. Car ladder line, pickup, et cetera, continues to get longer, it feels like, as our school continues to grow, which is, again, good problems to have. But we'd love to be able to partner with the school system and provide some type of enforcement. Again, that would potentially allow us, if that's a ticketing situation, to ticket those individuals, but we'll have to further discuss that with the school system. Very back, pink shirt.
Hi, my name is Molly. My family lives on Morning Glory. Thank you for this presentation. It's really informative. You mentioned that the revenue estimates are based on hotel occupancy rates. So I'm curious, if the revenue estimates are based on tourists, why we're talking about charging residents in the same way that we're charging visitors. And so my question is, have we considered a resident permit?
We have considered that, and that is one of the issues that the parking committee took up. The parking committee overwhelmingly recommended that there be no discounted rate for residents. That was one of the recommendations. So I can read the list if you'd like. I won't give the names, but I will give you the organizations of everybody that was on the committee. The Chamber of Commerce Director, Tourism Development Authority Director. We had three residents at large. They were just residents that were selected. We had 2 business owners, our Parks and Recreation Director. We had 2 town council members, the town manager, myself, our finance director. We had representatives, or at least invited representatives from every church. We had one church that did not participate. We did invite the school to participate, and they did participate for one meeting. But again, that's such a unique environment that we felt maybe we just needed to deal with that separately. And that makes up the list of the representatives.
And I would add, so again, just stating, so we're proposing paid parking from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So this is not 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So prior to 9 a.m., obviously after 5 p.m., if you're coming into town to eat and dine, that is, paid parking is not going to be an issue for you. If you're coming into town, is one of the proposals that we've added since we've started getting some feedback. The 30-minute free option is something that we're going to propose to town council as well. That will allow you to run in and get a coffee or a paper or something of that nature. Everything outside of that is going to be very difficult to maintain. Our population continues to grow. So if we were to include residents for free, that would mean we would need permitting for all the residents. That would potentially get into the thousands of individuals that would be included in that. And that's a difficult thing, obviously, to manage or try to manage as you go through that. So,
As a follow-up, the permit wouldn't need to be free. It would just allow the residents to pay for the permit and then not pay each time that they want to go to the park with their kids. So it's hard to go to the pool. I mean, not run a 30-minute errand, but actually take advantage of all the wonderful things about living in our town.
And that's something that's been considered. The issue that we run into is how do we estimate how much time you intend to spend in that parking space? And that may be different for each resident. So we may have residents that maybe spend 2 or 3 hours a month on Main Street. We may have residents that spend 20 hours a month on Main Street. So how do we come up with a price for that permit is the issue with that.
I mean, it seems like part of the goal of this was to improve the quality of life for the residents. And I think it's doing.
I mean, so like as a parent, I can say like, I'm not gonna pay to bring my kids to the playground when we have free playgrounds elsewhere. Like that's just not, I mean, like you built this beautiful brand new playground and we're not gonna use it. And similarly, like after school, like I'm not gonna pay to keep my kids after school just to play on the playground, like when we can go outside of Blowing Rock, so.
Well, part of tonight, again, is to provide feedback. So that's what we're here for, is collecting feedback. We don't have, obviously, all the answers. We are attempting to provide answers to the questions that you're asking. So continue to provide that feedback. And again, we do have individuals in the room that are collecting this feedback. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Ron Jensen, I'm a full-time resident of Blowing Rock and homeowner. And my wife and I guess our big question is, it seems like you have very good representation in the town right here. Would it be possible to do a quick survey of how many residents of Blowing Rock would like to pay for parking and have to go through that?
I don't think so. So here is my take on that. Not interested necessarily tonight in gathering a poll.
The answer.
So we'll give you one opportunity to do that, and the next opportunity will be out the door. So let's not do that once again. So as I put up as part of our respectful dialogue of tonight is to keep this respectful. And respectful feedback is what we're going to do tonight. I would assume, based on if you would like a show of hands, the majority of the people in the room are against paid parking. I think that's why most people come out. So we're not asking necessarily for a polling of that. We know what the issues are. So, but
Can I respond to that?
sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm definitely not against paid parking. I see the need to raise funds to expand parking in the future and that kind of thing. I think the majority of people probably do, but it's just the part about this is a problem caused by the increase in tourism. So my thought, my wife's thought as well, is tourism should mostly pay for that. And that's not really what's going to happen here. If you're charging tax-paying residents, homeowners who come into town potentially regularly, it just does not feel fair.
Okay. Jay?
Jay Hudson, 989 Main Street. What about employees? That's, most, I think every business owner in here realizes that since COVID, it's difficult to find people to work. Most of them cannot afford to live in one block, so they're doing the outside of one block. And where are we gonna put these people? I mean, can businesses, small businesses afford to pay for their employees to park every day?
No, we can't.
So that's, we do have that free parking area at the Devant Field that we designated as a free parking area. We are also,
Work on a rainy, snowy,
Right.
day.
right, well, I understand, we've also had that recommendation that we try to come up with a permitting system for merchants and their employees. And that is a recommendation that was on a previous slide that we are looking at, trying to work through the logistics of how that would work. So we are taking a look at that. I have spoken to a couple of business owners, and I won't call them out unless they want to stand and speak. But we do have business owners in Blowing Rock that have businesses in town where they already have paid parking. So they already have to deal with this. And Boone, for example, has paid parking and they don't provide any exceptions or any parking for any of their employees. So those are left for the businesses to figure out. And again, we did poll our businesses and we have about 35, there's really only about 25 businesses that have no parking. There's about 10 more businesses that have some parking but not enough parking. So that is something that we're considering, trying to work out the logistics to see if that's possible and what it would look like.
I'm Joe Amoroso, Clary Court.
Have you all considered a partnership with Apple Cart that would allow you to bring in employees and tourists without the use of a car? Maybe an hourly schedule, we could help pay for it. It seems to be solve the problems of finding employees. They might be more encouraged if they know they'd have a bus to use.
Great question, and the answer is yes. So for the last 4 years, a council member and myself have met with Apple Cart to discuss potential partnerships. Apple Cart is structured and mostly funded through federal grants that are requiring a certain amount of ridership. So they obviously utilize the ridership of Appalachian and Boone to fulfill a number of those needs. And so for us to partner with them would be a difficult thing. That's why we have begun or have discussed now for a couple of years about a potential shuttle system that we would operate ourselves. I don't think Apple Cart, and I think I can speak for them, would be a viable option. I don't think they're interested in just their structure and how they're formed with the federal monies that they receive, again, in the ridership there. So I do think if we go to a shuttle system, and Roger Brooks, like I said, did mention that as being something that was much needed to provide free transportation on a consistent basis. We'd be better fit to do that ourselves versus partnering with Apple Cart. I don't think we could get that consistent feedback, unfortunately.
Seems like some of those federal funds could apply to Blowing Rock's needs. And also, it just seems to be better to have a system that meshes with Apple Cart's normal schedule, so the students and the tourists could get on an Apple Cart and know they're being taken and will mesh with the timing of the shuttle bus to Blowing Rock.
Absolutely. We would welcome a partnership with Apple Cart, especially from Boone to Blowing Rock, if we could provide that, if they could provide that transportation to get students here, which is a good chunk of our workforce. We would absolutely be more than welcome to have that conversation with them and provide that partnership. Yes, ma'am. Agree.
My name is Emily Roberts. I live up on Morningside. I also run a Facebook group called Blowing Rock community page. It's mainly residents. I keep out tourists. There was a poll posted. We had some really constructive, very good conversations about parking. There was a poll someone posted. There were 220 responses. Of those, 195 were against parking. They said, do not do anything with parking. That's 90%. So just feedback, 90%. My question is, can you put the goal back up there that was the original goal? Because from what I remember, it said residents, like the goal was residents. And it seems like everything from charging to go to the parking, park, or charging to go to the pool. No, the one that said what the goal was originally from the.
Oh, okay, from the Roger Brooks group.
Yeah, the Roger one.
There it is.
The quality of life for local residents. I feel like this goes completely against that.
Well, again, one of the major complaints that I hear on a daily basis that goes to the quality of life is that there is no parking. That residents can't come downtown because they can't find a parking space.
But
So that is
there's still
one of
a
the
problem in Boone. They have parking meters and it's still a problem in Boone. That's not gonna.
Absolutely. But the purpose in the pay to park is to generate revenues to build more parking and figure out how we generate those revenues. We saw the 3 ways to do that.
What would it be? I mean, you mentioned the other one was property taxes. What would it be to divide that amongst every property to get the 1.2 million?
Because that's not a lot, that's just.
Yeah, so surprisingly very high. So if you were to build a $13 million parking structure, it would be in excess of 5 cents on the tax rate to pay for that one particular parking structure, which is a pretty significant tax increase. So our previous history here of building parking structures like the parking structure that's located here beside of us at the American Legion, along with the one at Brom, has been to utilize a partnership between the property taxes and the TDA to help pay for that. The costs that we're dealing with, especially to build parking in the numbers that we're in need of, are excess of what is really available to have that partnership, unless we have a significant tax increase. That's why we put the 3 options up there. And there's only 2 viable options. I will go ahead and say the second option, which is to potentially have a downtown development tax. is not a viable option, given the fact that we do not have enough value in our downtown businesses from a property tax standpoint to generate enough revenue to offset the debt service that it would take to build that. So number two is essentially crossed off the list from a just paying for the debt service standpoint. It could generate revenues, not enough revenues to pay for the debt. So we're really, if we're going to add additional parking, and again, that's not something that has been decided, that's still up for the town council to decide. If we're going to build additional parking, we really only have two mechanisms to pay for it, which is either paid parking or a increase in property taxes, or maybe some combination of both. And that,
1.2 million a year, that takes 13
That's gonna be
years.
30, and that's only for 200, they need 600 is
Yeah,
what
so,
Mr. Brooks
I mean,
Rogers
you're
said.
throwing out the tax property number for 13 million, but paid parking is getting us 1 million.
Right?
and I'll answer this and then we'll move on. So the question comes when you're building any type of parking structure, any other structure, you're looking to smooth that out over debt service. That's why I'm dealing or giving the numbers that I'm giving. So, Virginia?
Virginia Powell, 255 Club Lane, Wilmot, lived here for 15 years. I don't want to pay for parking. I was on the council when Roger Brooks came. He said we have a parking problem 6 to 8 days a year.
Yeah.
If the University of Alabama could park 100,077 people on game day, and they do it, and we're not thinking outside the box here. So I think there's a win-win idea that we're not thinking about to keep our village. When I was on the council and we bought those two properties, I was not thinking they would be for parking deck. So if we're gonna make $1.2 million, why don't we let the tourists pay for the residents and the business and employees to park? Win-win.
Great.
Let's look at something.
Jeff?
All right, I'm Jeff O'Brien. I live at 151 Edge Hill, and I was one of the people selected for the focus group for the residents and Roger Brooks when he was in town. And one of the numbers that stuck out to me was that he said we have, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but it said we had a little over 400 parking spaces available in town. And on any given day, we've got a little over 400 employees in town, considering all the businesses. And I have a business in town and a virtual office space, and so they're not really my employees, but these guys depend on me for providing parking. And so what I've seen so far is, for me to have a monthly parking pass for my guys in my office, that really the only private lots, not the public lots, are gonna be where I would go for that. And to be honest with you, if the Wells Fargo's lot is any example of what we're gonna see from the private business owners, which is their prerogative to do that, but if that's the kind of rates, it's not feasible. It is not financially feasible for my business, and I'm sure it is not financially feasible for most small businesses in town to pay for their employees' parking with those kind of rates on a monthly basis. In addition to that, again, what Jay Vincent said, we already have a problem bringing employees. I mean, App State used to be a great source for employees. And for since COVID, it's been hard getting them over here to Blowing Rock. And so whether the employee, if they don't pay for the parking and they put it on the employee, then that's another obstacle that we're gonna put on bringing, and I think it's gonna be potentially more harm than good. I'm on the fence. I mean, I'm not against paid parking. I just think that it might be, my feeling is the cart before the horse.
Right.
That we need to make more accommodations for the employees of all the businesses in town before we start doing this, because the Devant Field lot, I'm sorry, that is not near enough parking for the amount of employees that you have working in town. And then one last little question, and this is totally different. From this presentation, you said that the pay system that we're looking at is a cellular based, and that's using the apps and also using the kiosk, we're gonna use a cellular. We've got a cellular signal problem in town. We got really bad. So I think.
We're, I'll address that right quick. The town's working on building out Wi-Fi to all these locations. So they are cellular based, but any place that we have a cellular issue, we're gonna have a Wi-Fi access point, so that can be switched to.
Yeah, so 2 months ago, town council, I think it was 2 months ago, voted to move forward with extending our free Wi-Fi throughout all of downtown. That's down Sunset, that's down to towards 221. All areas that would have paid parking will have good, reliable Wi-Fi within the next probably 8 to 10 weeks. Prior to anything would be implemented here. So that was something that was consideration, is giving multiple options. If a cell signal wasn't possible, then we would have a Wi-Fi signal that would offer that opportunity as well. Yes, ma'am. Right there. Sorry, I'll get you next. My bad.
Mary Fenton, I live at Blue Ridge Vista. I have a few questions for clarification more than anything.
Sure.
How many permanent residents do we have in Blowing Rock?
1,350.
Okay. And when you did the occupancy numbers to get how many parking places you needed, were any of those residential numbers included in that?
They were not, and again, we were trying to come up with a formula, so that is not a guarantee. So the 1.2 was put up there just as a number to show what potentially could be generated. That number we fully expect to be much different than that, whether that's lower or higher. We're unknown, so we were just trying to give a baseline of what was that could potentially be generated.
Okay, is that your question, or are you asking about the 600 additional parking spaces slide? Was that your question about the percentage?
No, I was, the question that you used to get the $1.9 million.
1.2.
Yeah. That's what you used the occupancy rate for.
Correct. If it was 50% for a particular month, we use the amount of time that space could be charged, the rate, and then the percentage itself is how we came up with that, just as a baseline to begin with.
So basically, you could get over $1 million by just charging tourists.
No, just charging that space. So if we go to a pay to park system, a parking space has a value on it based on the hours and the amount that we would charge based on that. We use that number times the percentage that we utilized from the TDA to come up with the baseline. We don't necessarily know if that's going to be higher or lower. We were just trying to give a baseline within that. So I don't want you to get too hung up on that number. That's what Roger Brooks had used as well as a methodology, but that parking space itself has a value.
Okay, and one more question, just for point of order as we go forward. If the council decides to vote on this, does the town get to vote? I mean, if they decide to move forward on this, does the town get to vote, or
Is it a done deal?
if the council votes to implement this, it's done?
So there is no formal vote like you would do in November. That's not allowed to take a vote. So if the council wants to move forward with maybe additional surveys, that's something that's an option as well. But nothing is in the works right now other than tonight for us to have this town hall meeting. But the next steps could be a number of things that council may choose to do. They could potentially put out a survey or something similar to that as well. But nothing is in the works as of right now to be confirmed.
But there is a way to put it on a November ballot.
There is not in North Carolina. There is not. So it has to be either a bond or financial referendum of some sort to put it on the ballot, asking whether or not you would like or don't dislike a paid to park system is not something that you can put on a ballot in North Carolina. That's not allowed. It has to be either for an election itself, or it has to be some type of money debt referendum to go on that.
All right, thank you.
Oh, right here, I'm sorry. Oh, Jim, you're next. Ma'am, you're next. I apologize for the last time for skipping you.
That's okay. I'm Sally Corrigan. I live at 456 Ransom Street. I'm a full-time resident. And I work a couple days a week at the Bee in the Boxwood on Main Street. And I typically, my husband usually drops me off to work, so I don't take a parking space. But on the days that I do have to drive, I try and park in the Maple Street lot. But I I watched today, which was very interesting, when all the big signs went up in the old Wells Fargo lot, no one parked there. It was just, it was like the world had ended. But I have a couple of questions, some concerns and some questions. My first concern is that this paid parking is gonna be discouraging at best to our visitors who are already showing signs of the weakened economy. They're being a little less freewheeling with their discretionary income. We're seeing that sort of in retail sales. I think restaurants are seeing it, people pull back too. This is gonna directly impact our town's budget. Our sales tax revenue is contributes 20% to the general fund for the town's budget. That is it's gonna impact the residents ultimately. I just feel as though the paid parking is really gonna hit all of us. Through budgetary measures, the trickle-down effect. Also, my other a couple concerns, the post office. I live on Ransom Street, we don't have in-town delivery, I have to go to the post office. And I mean, through the summers and everything, I've seen campers parked there, people camping out in the parking lot at the post office, I'm trying to get into my box just to get my bills. So that's another concern that, again, it's gonna push people into the post office, which is gonna put a strain on residents. We've got weddings, funerals, things like that that are gonna happen in town. Maybe somebody, that has a tremendous, a group of people that love them and wanna come to their funeral. Are you gonna ask them to pay to park because it's on a Saturday afternoon or a Saturday morning? And the final concern is the future proposed parking deck out on 321. Visitors.
Not yet determined, that was mentioned.
But I mean, just as an idea though, to get people to hike up Sunset, to come and shop, how realistic is that for feasibility, for guests, people in wheelchairs, maybe elderly people? I had some people in the shop today that had been to Hendersonville, or is it Henderson or Hendersonville recently, that had just implemented the paid parking. Like, we're not going there again. We had to pay to park. And I think it was maybe $3 an hour. It was, it made a difference to them.
Sure.
So anyway, that's what I have to say. Thank you for listening.
These are just some quick thoughts and questions for you. Are you prepared, or are you going to prepare a pro forma kind of financial statement at some particular point in time to share with how much this is going to actually cost to start up? And then where are we going to get that money from? I know in June, I think there's a new budget you're going to have to come up with. Is that going to be like a next year? So what is the timing of this? I'd be interested in everybody, if you were going to proceed, what it would be. Are there going to be any options? For instance, a hybrid system someplace in town. And I think you touched on it, but it would be a pay, and then some other areas that might be a different kind. Maybe it's free, maybe it's some other kind of system, but it would be a choice. I'm interested in who's going to manage this whole project if it goes ahead. And with that, how many people are we going to have to hire to manage this project?
Sure.
And where will they come from? You don't need to know that tonight, but when you
we did, yeah, we have all those answers already. So we have presented the pro forma along with the cost estimate of operations and capital to the council. We have, and I'll be more than happy. Chief has prepared that. I'm not sure if we really want to go into that detail, but we do have those numbers. We have presented those numbers to council as being both the operating cost of that and the capital cost of what would be the upfront needs as well. So we are not proposing this to town council to start in the next few months. So what discussions happened at the retreat, and then I think at our January, February meeting, were to push this back if we were to go forward with this later into 2023, if not the beginning of 2024. So we're not here tonight discussing that this is going to be implemented in the next 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. we did not feel like that was going to be something that was needed or the most intelligent move on our behalf. We want to get this right if we're going to do it. So therefore, doing it in the middle of July or August or September is not going to be feasible to do. So again, all the feedback tonight is perfect because, again, we're gathering this feedback for these potential choices for the town council to weigh in on and then what they like and they don't like.
So that whenever it comes out, there'll be another meeting where the people can see the figures, so how much everything's gonna cost.
Yes, and
To the best of your ability.
yes, and we have, I think now, if not, we can post the full parking proposal that does include those cost numbers. We did have that at one point on our website. If not, we can post that, absolutely post that. We already have what we believe is a really good fine-tuned cost number for both operating and capital. We can get that on the website, along with the full parking proposal here as well.
Okay, thank you.
Coley?
My name is Clay Charlton. Live at 1786 Main Street in Blowing Rock. We have been permanent residents of Blowing Rock for the past 22 years. Just for the record, I am opposed to this proposed parking tax that y'all are putting forth tonight, and it is a tax. It's not a fee, it's an additional tax on people who park. I believe that this municipality gets their revenue through taxation. I already, for this municipality to propose to charge me for parking on property that is owned and maintained by a property tax that I already pay is just an additional taxation that I don't need. So I am therefore opposed to it.
Thank you, Coley.
Austin Northern, we have lived here and we live on Skyland. Two comments was just the employee thing. I mean, it's I know Chuck can speak the same thing. We have people leaving at like 10:30 at night. Even walking to the Maple lot or even to the church or even this lot right here, I get calls. College kids feel uncomfortable.
Very scary.
So having them walk to the baseball field might be a little,
I would.
and the other suggestion, or I have two suggestions or two questions I've been considered. Chief, I know y'all are busy. We use my words lightly because my brother-in-law works for you. So, that good old boy who walks around chalking cars. If the issue is turnover, instead of 3 hours, why isn't it just 1 hour? It's a thought. And then the second thought is, this whole time, have there been any proposals? Because again, there are 1,300 residents. I know there's a lot of Florida tags on the property. Is there any discussion about, I don't know if it's being illegal, but the non-residents who have property here, could they help pitch in for this thing when they're only spending a month in their house a year? So, but thank you.
Easy on the last one, though. Obviously, not legal to charge different rates for different people, different neighborhoods, things like that. That would be interesting for sure to do that. So, no, uniform approach. Red umbrella.
Sorry. I have some concerns. Leela Silver, my husband and I own Story Street Grill. I feel like there's a disconnect in season between local residents and local merchants. Hard to get in. And off season is kind of the time of year that gets utilized. People feel like they can come in my space and, enjoy it without having to be around tourists. And so doing a year-round paid park, I feel like is gonna deter that. And if you think $3 doesn't matter to somebody, charge them for a dressing. Charge them for something they ate. You will find out how much a couple of dollars actually adds up. My other concern is my business is way on the south end, Van Field's down here. I have employees leaving late at night. And I 100% know that Blowing Rock, there's not situations where their safety is a concern for me. So having my staff walking that far at night concerns me. And I also don't think that employees are going to want to have to walk, so I will have to figure out shuttle situations for them with my limited parking. You know, I have some, but I don't have enough to handle my entire employee staff. So I just think, you know, there does need to be some perspective. If we're gonna offer employers an opportunity for parking permits, then residents should probably also be considered the same. You know, some kind of permitting for them to use that, because that is gonna actually create more of a disconnect between us and them as well. But I didn't know if y'all had really thought about the safety factors for restaurants that are open later at night. Our employees don't leave when we close, they leave 2 or 3 hours after.
A couple of questions I'll respond to. We absolutely have thought about the employee piece is a big piece. We understand that. That's why it's one of the recommendations that we're trying to work through with the logistics. The safety is a huge concern. That's why we're trying to make sure that these lots where we will have people parking, that they're well lit, they're monitored, that kind of thing. I want to go back to one of the slides or the information that Roger Brooks presented, that we need 400 parking spaces in Blowing Rock just for employees. That's almost as many parking spaces as we have.
Yeah.
So the issue becomes, if we issue a permit or free parking or whatever that looks like to employees, we still don't have any parking because that takes every parking space that we have. So that's the issue we're up against. We know that nobody wants to pay for parking. Nobody. I don't want to pay for parking when I come to town with my grandkids to go to the park or whatever. But this is the issue that we're up against. How do we create more parking? How do we help our visitors share in that cost without the people that are already paying the cost paying more? One other thing I'll respond to quickly, because it's just a hot topic all the time, is the post office parking. That's a private parking lot. We have no control over the post office parking lot. In the past, historically, when we've had issues, the post office employees have not been interested in regulating their own parking. So if we do have a system in place where we can partner with private lots, we will certainly extend that offer to the post office and try to help manage that. Currently, they haven't been interested in that, and we have zero authority to regulate any parking at the post office. So.
And I will address the seasonality option. That is an option. There are towns that do seasonal parking. So there's an off season and an on season. The only challenge is, just like you all that have this in town, is obviously keeping that staff, if that's a full-time employee, busy during those times. Again, that is options that have been on the table and have been discussed by town councils. Do we need to look at this more in a seasonality approach? Again, going back just to the committee, the answer there was no. That's why they kind of looked at a short window or a window of time, Monday through Saturday, with the Sunday afternoons as being a part of that. But that is still on the table, as everything is on the table for discussion. In the green shirt.
Hi, I'm Tammy Jolly. I'm a resident of Morningside. I also own Rustic in Blowing Rock and Art of Oil. And when I had Art of Oil on King Street, I had some direct experience with when they initiated paid parking. And I had customers coming in irate, saying, I'm never coming back. Eventually, in 2017, I moved to Shops at Shadowline. And I started seeing customers coming in saying, I haven't seen you for 2 years because I was not going to go pay for parking. So just kind of, I guess we will, I think it's pretty much inevitable. We will lose some folks that just won't or can't pay. And I don't know what the answer is to it, but I think it's just something we'll have to deal with somehow.
And again, one of the questions that we have, that Roger Brooks proposed, are we losing customers now because they can't find a parking space on the street?
I don't, do you really think it's going to change and that we're going to end up with the pay parking is going to give us, until you can build a deck, is it going to change any of that?
Now in the back.
I'm Bonnie Holmes. I'm at 482 Skyland View. And thank you very much for having this meeting. While I've only been on Skyland View for 5 years, we've owned property here for 20 years. And I think it's generous that, that we can come outside the hours of 9 to 5, but the shops don't open until 10 and they close at 5. So that is all of our shopping. So if I want to spend money shopping here, then I will have to pay to do that. I have a few questions and then just some comments. Will there be a time limit on the meters? Like somebody can stay all day, or will that have to turn over?
No meters, by the way.
I'm sorry.
There won't be time limits per se, and this is to start out with and see how it works. The thought process is to increase the hourly rate to encourage people on street. Remember, the on street is Main Street, Sunset Drive, on street parking, to try to encourage those people to turn those spaces over. Currently, and this was a question that already came up, currently we have a 3-hour parking maximum. That's been in place for many, many years. Town council sets that rate, and that was based on feedback from merchants. Some places do 4 hours, some 3. But the thought process is we'll use the increase in the fee per hour after 3 hours to try to turn that space over. There will not be any time limits on the off-street parking, which is Maple Street, the parking decks, and those areas.
So it still seems to me like that could backfire. Somebody that's here on vacation, that's willing to spend money on the parking, they're gonna plug it or do whatever on their app, pay all day, hang out at, go have something to eat, play at the playground, go take a hike, do some things, and they're still not spending more money at each shop as if it were turning over. So just a thought. You said possibly partnering with lots, I'm guessing like the churches, and you said it says North Carolina law that the money spent on parking needs to go back into parking. Would that be a requirement that the church that earns money, that has to go back into parking, or would that be a moneymaker for them?
No, as I stated, so in North Carolina, and I'll state it again for the audience, on-street parking, which is Main Street, Pine Street, Sunset, the on-street parking monies have to be used to offset the cost of parking. Off-street parking can be utilized to offset debt service, parking capital, things of that nature.
Okay. And also, if we start charging for something that was free, it seems like we possibly could get less visitors. And right now, if the visitors are coming and they're working it out, and maybe, yes, they have to drive around a few times, it's working. And they're not mad at the town, or I'm never coming back because they're making me pay. But basically, it's just really disappointing to me and very sad that me or residents that are already paying our property taxes, and that has increased, will be limited and won't be able to drive downtown and park for an hour or 2 hours and enjoy what we have here. I think something like an annual pass that we have to pay, as somebody mentioned, would be a great idea. Or if not that, even a few days a week that we can come down and park for free would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Pink.
As a business owner, I'm Molly Northern, and we live in Lone Rock, and I have to be in Boxwood. But a question that a friend of mine asked me today: what would the projected revenue increase be for business owners when you're counting on that turnover in the spaces? So what would that equate to for a business owner? Like, why would I be encouraged to do it if, he said, well, Molly, you need to ask them what kind, what's that number look like for the increase in revenue?
I don't have a number.
Yeah, so, we don't have a number. We don't have a number now for each individual business owner, other than what we do here. And so I'll go back to answer a few of the last questions and maybe try to dovetail this back in, Molly, to an extent, is that for at least 20 years, we've heard about parking issues in town, primarily on Main Street, a lot from the businesses, a lot from the residents about lack of parking or parking turnover. And so there's no doubt if we can If that space is going to be filled and we can encourage that parking space to be filled in front of your store and turn it over more often, I fully expect that's going to generate more revenue. We don't have those numbers, and I don't know how we would derive those numbers other than installing something like a pay to park system. So, what we hear and what we've heard now for, again, a number of years is that parking is an issue in town. So as we look through different options, like turning over parking or logistical issues with parking, and especially adding parking, I think that all plays into a factor. If we could add parking and again, rub the crystal ball and get a magic answer back that says that additional parking is filled as well, that would more than likely mean more folks in town, more shopping, more retail, more restaurants, et cetera. So there's a lot of unknown. Absolutely, there's unknown every time you go into any type of endeavor most of the time, but there's some unknowns there that we don't have projections on for sure. Green shirt, I think. So.
I'm Laura G. I live on Green Shirt. And I'd just like to say that, as many other residents have said, I definitely feel from a study that was supposed to enhance our quality of life, that what you're proposing is going to detract from my quality of life. And it sounds like it's also, I was thinking about just the hassle of parking, but of having to pay to park, but also not having people working in the shops and restaurants because they can't afford to pay. It's going to detract from my quality of life as well. And I do have a question. You mentioned maybe giving us a few resident-only spots in the Maple lot. How are you, if you don't permit residents, how are you going to police that?
The people who would like to use those spaces would have to go through a permitting process. That's the only way we would know who you are. So those folks who wanted to do that would have to go through a permitting process.
Would you consider a one-time annual permit?
Yes,
In those cases?
yes, and that would be part of our permitting. Yes, we are considering that. Again, trying the logistical problem with that is coming up with a rate for everywhere, because I've heard from other residents who say, I never come downtown. I don't want to have to pay for a permit or whatever because I never come downtown. There are those residents there. So the logistical issue there to try to work through is what would be a fair rate for a monthly or annual permit if residents wanted to purchase that.
Questions? What questions do we have left?
Another green shirt.
Yeah, green shirt.
I'm Lynn Hill. I live at Clary Court. I am a realtor and I work downtown. But in a former life, in the early 80s, I was a tourism consultant for the state of North Carolina. I worked with cities and counties all over the state. And one of the things I know is that what we're talking about here today is the success of our Chamber of Commerce and our Tourism Development Authority and the success of Watauga County's economic development in bringing visitors to the area, which we worked like dogs to do. And so we now have successful restaurants, successful shops, wonderful museums and churches that are burgeoning and so on and so forth. So I don't want it to become a thing about me. I want quality of life too. Quality of life for residents versus those tourists who come, visitors. That's not what it's about, because the visitors are a blessing to us. They enable us to have a year-round community. I've had property here for 29 years. I've lived here for 20, and it was not a year-round town when I first came up here 29 years ago. The restaurants weren't open, the shops weren't open. Janice knows that. Was not, was it? No way. So anyway, so let's don't get tourism visitors. It's the visitor industry. Let's don't get tourism versus residents. Let's find a way that we can do this. I don't want people to think of visitors as menaces, if you know what I mean.
Well said, absolutely. We don't exist without each one of the stakeholders, and visitors are a huge stakeholder in this town and have been from the
That's
get-go.
what we live on.
Absolutely. Jeff?
Jeff Walker, I own Blowing Rock Brewing Company. I'll phrase my comment as a question. Has the town considered remote parking on those properties along Valley Boulevard? And if so, any kind of seasonal shuttle, not year-round, but July, October? And then also, has the town considered a very, almost as a formality, like a sticker on the window for residents and maybe employees to park in these spaces that you're also paying for parking, that are paid parking spaces?
Let me ask, so the parking on 321, would that be free parking or would we still have a paid parking system?
It would be paid, yeah.
Okay.
But it would make it so that so that those two properties that the town already owns are utilized, and also bring the parking. I think Roger Brooks said that the downtown should be about people, not cars, right? I remember him saying that. And so we have a big seasonal flux issue. It goes from the way this Main Street and Sunset looked today, where somebody would have to pay to have lunch, to July when they can drive around for 45 minutes and not find a space.
It's still gonna happen.
Again, yeah, the seasonality is in play, absolutely. So
shuttling during the season with remote lots and
potentially in play as well.
In other words, an
absolutely.
integrated strategy that has a long-term.
Yeah, again, yeah, all things are being considered, absolutely. So it is, one of the things that have come from these discussions are, do we want to do this 12 months out of the year, or is this more of a seasonal approach? Again, that is up for discussion. Absolutely, it is up for discussion. And a shuttle system would be the same way if we were to implement a shuttle system, whether or not we would do that full-time or whether or not we would do that seasonally.
Just one follow-up, it's possible that the shops on the Parkway with their lot, that they benefit from the same shuttle route.
Absolutely.
As the two lots.
Similar to the apple cart route that happens now on the Friday and Saturday nights during the busy season, so to speak, Friday nights and Saturday days. Absolutely, that would be from kind of one end of the town to the other would be something that we would consider, of course. Who's next? I'm not sure how many hands have been up. Okay, perfect.
One quick question, the 1.2 million in revenue, is that net expenses?
No, that was, our projection was gross on that. That was gross.
So there were actually the 13 million needed right now to build the deck would take longer than some of the numbers you were talking about.
Yeah.
Would not take longer again, the 13, whatever, again, so I don't want you to, and I'm a numbers person, I don't want you to get hung up necessarily on the exact numbers that are being presented. Those are some hypothetical numbers that we're putting out there because you have to start somewhere. And if you don't think you should, then, that's shame on you, but you have to start somewhere with projecting some numbers out there. Putting a debt service or something into place to build an additional parking structure would be obviously over a period of more than likely 20 years, you would pay that back. The 1.2 million projection is a gross number. We're looking at operating costs somewhere in the neighborhood of about $300,000 a year, or a little bit less, for full enforcement, overview, the fees that go into the system, et cetera. So there still is a pretty hefty amount of profit we believe that could be used to offset some of the debt service that would be needed to build the additional parking structure. Who's next? I don't want to keep skipping. And the blue sweater, or blue sweater scarf.
Right behind JD.
Yeah.
Hi, Kenny. Kenny Hollins with David Laughlin. I have employees that are mature, and you're walking from Savant to here, and if they fall and get injured, who's responsible for something such as that? At nighttime, again, I'm with them about safety, and the next question I have is, my mom is 82 years old, and you're gonna ask her to put an app on her phone and figure out how to do what? And did I understand I have to put my credit card in here too? How do I pay for this? And can you answer me one more question?
That's a lot of questions.
I'm sorry, Aaron, I'm sorry, Chief. The visualizing of the I'm probably showing my ignorance here, but the visualizing of the license plates. What did you mean by that and could you help? Sorry.
So I'll try to unpack all that. We have taken the employees and some of our more senior employees that work in town into consideration. That is exactly why Shane and I have we probably met 7 or 8 times over the last couple of months to try to figure out a logistical solution. That's why we're looking at some sort of a permitting option for some of the employees, whether that's logistically, we're trying to figure out if that's a certain number of spaces per business, what the rate's gonna be. There's some logistical things we're trying to work out. But we are definitely taking that in consideration and trying to work through that. The app itself, yes, when you download that app into your phone, you would put your credit card information in there. That's the way you pay for it every time you have a parking option. But again, we do have those multi-space pay stations for folks who are not smartphone people, so that they have that option to use those as well.
So she's 82 years old and you want her to walk how far to get there so she can pass her Kilwins and get her ice cream?
So I'll clarify by saying we aren't wanting anything. So we're facilitators here in this. So as the questions continue to get a little bit more personal and more heated, So we are facilitating the meeting. Ben.
So thank you both. You could have kicked the can like so many other people did, but you and council took this on after decades of kicking the can, and you knew this was going to be hard, and you did it anyway. So thank you both. The town is lucky to have you both.
See you later.
And then what I wanted to ask was, I work at Abstain.
Yes, sir.
I have to pay for parking for my job. I'm an employee. I have to walk a long way. I'll walk in the rain. I'll walk in the snow. It can be done. What you're proposing is not so different than what other places do, what App State does. My question is, have you looked at some other towns and seen what they do? Because there is an inconvenience factor, and that's the one that kind of rings home. Is I like Jeff's idea of being able to pay by month, which is what I do at App State. We have a tagless, similar system with video cameras and all, no gates, and I just pay by the month. And some of us work twice a week, some of us work 6 days a week. We all pay kind of the same. They just set the rate to make it work. So I wonder if other towns do this, and if we could do like a tagless system. And one more question: as a resident, I pay for parking anyway, right? Either I'm going to pay through my property tax, or I'm going to pay directly. So are we going to lump it in, or are we going to separate it? You could lump water bill, everything, power bill into one property tax in theory, but whoever uses more wouldn't be paying more. So I'd rather separate it out. Right now, residents pay for all the parking, and tourists don't pay anything. So I like the direction you're headed. People that use something, as an economic principle, people who use something ought to pay for it, right? And the more they use it, the more they ought to pay. So it's the right direction. I just hope you could make it more convenient for residents and employees, residents and employees, because the workforce issue is a really big one for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Ben. Yeah, so we visited countless towns, and everyone does something different. Absolutely, they do something different. I will say our number one issue here with doing anything that would provide convenience, and this is the truthful answer, is that we don't have the inventory. So we struggle without the inventory that other towns may have and the ability for the parking. So it's kind of, someone mentioned the cart before the horse type of thing. So if we were to build a parking structure today, if we were to move forward on a parking structure that would utilize some additional revenue source like property taxes and get that parking structure built, that's absolutely an option. But for several years, we're going to have to be able to find some funding to be able to get that up and running before the revenue comes in. And so that's the difficult trade-off that we have, is that we are lacking the inventory that other places may have. We would love to have some large satellite lots or some large free parking lots. And maybe that's coming as long as we can generate the revenue to pay for it. But it's absolutely one of those, the cart before the horse conversations with regards to convenience. We would love to wave the wand and create another 600 or 800 parking spaces and then start charging for it. But there's going to have to be a gap, saved there somehow with the revenue that's going to be needed to generate to offset the debt. And that may be an option the council wants to explore. We've discussed that previously as well as what that would look like. Pretty heavy lift is the unfortunate part. So I think that's the ultimate goal, as we put up here in a couple slides, is to take any revenue generated if we were to go forward with this and absolutely put that back into parking, to build additional parking, so we would have some conveniences and some options to do things differently. Hendersonville, for example, just finished a new parking deck that has certain levels just for employees. Options like that are all over the state, but we've got to find some way to build the inventory first. And if we do that prior to paid parking, and we can do that, we just have to find another source to do so. What other questions, or who hasn't spoken? I want to make sure we're getting new people. Yes, sir, right here in the front.
My name's Chuck Lubicki. I'm the Mellow Mushroom here in town and in Boone, so I've kind of been through the paid parking thing and going to what somebody said a while ago about it. For the business owners that are in town, get ready, because you're going to get blasted by people coming in that have just gotten a ticket on their car and they want you to pay for it. And even though, we tell them, oh, we really don't have anything to do with it, that's it. My question is though, will it help really turn over cars when people are having to pay only an extra $2 or $3 an hour to park? I personally, with the people that come to this town, I don't think so. They're gonna park and go, okay, $20 and stay here all day, cool. Let's do it.
$26.
And, pardon me?
It's $26.
Yeah, well, whatever it is, I would do it.
I would do it.
It wouldn't be a question. I understand not everybody's gonna do that. I'm not gonna have employees that are gonna do it. Also, obviously, I've got a big concern about the safety of people going, but we have, during the busy time of the year, 18 to 20 people in the restaurant at one time working. So that's 18 to 20 parking spaces out of the 60 that's going to be available down at ball field. So I'm not sure that those numbers come out good either. I understand there's got to be a change. I understand there's a lot of issues, but we'll just all try to work together and make it happen.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am, on the block.
I'm Kathleen Godwin. I also live at Blue Ridge Vista. I grew up in a resort town that had a very seasonal aspect to it. And when we paid our taxes, we got the sticker for 1 year in the mail, we put it on our car, and the residents never had to pay the fees. I'm wondering if that's something that would be possible for Blowing Rock.
Yeah, again, so similar questions that have been asked about residents and what options are on the table for potential permitting or stickers of some sorts that will allow.
Well, you wouldn't have to go register or do anything. You pay your taxes, you get your sticker, and that's it. And then if you don't pay your taxes next year, you don't get your sticker.
So if we were to move forward with some type of a resident permitting or resident sticker type program, we would still need to gather your license plate information. That's part of the system that we are planning on installing, is a license plate reader. So as we go down Main Street or we go in a parking lot, we're scanning license plates. That's the most efficient way of being able to enforce parking. So we would have to work through the details of what that would look like, whether that's something that would more than likely still require you to send in your information. And so if we do go towards a permitting option for residents, we would still have to gather some information, most notably your car make and information, tag number, that type of thing. So we'd be able to match that up as we were going through and enforcing parking to make sure you are who you are. So that would be something that council would need to consider as well. I see you. I'm just making sure anybody other that has not asked any questions, I want to make sure we don't double back before we do. Yes, sir.
I'm Boyce Cheatham. I live with my wife in Heritage. I think you can go ahead and try to post the study and the details of the finances of it in a pro forma.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you feel like if the pro forma is right to be looked at now and comment on?
So we feel like our cost numbers are absolutely right. So we know based on the hours of enforcement, what it's going to take to enforce it. We also know from the parking vendors that we're discussing the amount. So we know our cost numbers. Our revenue numbers, again, we're doing the best we can from projection. So we know that we're starting a little bit backwards with our cost numbers, and we can absolutely post what those would look like along with those potential projections.
And this will be going to the council on the 11th of April?
It is currently scheduled. That does not mean that it will. So we have to provide public notice. And so I think someone posted on a social media account that it was already decided. That is not the case. We are required, though, to post things in advance if we're going to discuss it. And so we felt like, again, like tonight, giving an opportunity and a forum here, we would go ahead and post that as a potential topic to be discussed on the 11th. Doesn't necessarily mean that we will. Doesn't also necessarily mean that it would be passed or denied on the 11th. It could be tabled. But like everything, we will post within a week's time or more what agenda items that are coming up on the council agenda. I think council's here. Again, they stayed throughout the duration of this, and they're hearing the feedback. So it'll be up to them to decide what that agenda looks like.
Well, I know how hard it is to do studies like this and try to bring them together and work them out. But it sounds like there are enough issues coming up here that it's not quite right for a decision. And I'd like the chance to look at it and put it all up on a whiteboard and submit some additional comments and thoughts on it.
Okay.
Because I know we live far enough from the downtown where we're located that we can't walk in. There are no sidewalks or things to kind of, so we have to drive.
Yeah, absolutely. So we could post on the website the proposal. We can post the links to the many other meetings we've had over the past few years discussing this, including the proposal as well. We can absolutely, all that's available. We can create a folder of some sorts that would allow all information to be viewed within a nice kind of concise area.
Well, if you can do that as soon as possible.
Sure.
I'm in and out of town a lot, but I'd love the chance to look at the details. I used to be a planner in a past life, management and economic development, downtown development. I have enough PTSD, I don't do that. But I appreciate what y'all have done, and I'd like to give some comments to it.
Sure.
Just some other thoughts.
Yeah, we can absolutely get that done the next day. We can do that by tomorrow, but we can do that. So absolutely. Kathy, yeah.
Hi, I'm Catherine. I have a business in the Barton House at 1098 Main Street. I've been thinking about this goal that's up here about mitigating some of the challenges relating to peak seasons. As a business owner, I definitely benefit from the peak seasons, and I actually talk to my customers. I find out why they come from June to October, and they come for all the reasons that we love living here. Also, I am coming off of my 8th winter in downtown Blowing Rock, and as a business owner in downtown Blowing Rock, sometimes it's pulling teeth. I appreciate hearing what you said. It's a trade-off. We need our locals to come in, let's say from mid-November through the quiet, rainy, snowy, sleety, foggy days in March and April. Kind of like when we go to the beach, there's paid parking from May to July. But you can go to the beach anytime in December, park anywhere you want, and the residents and locals are gonna be glad to see you because you're providing something that, you're providing income from out of town. Has that been considered? I know some of the days of the week are quieter. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I love it, and I make a big deal about it when my locals come in on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I give them high fives if they come in on a rainy day. I thank them if they come in with more than 2 people. I mean, these are things that help businesses like mine not only stay here, but think about a long-term vision in downtown Blowing Rock. So what about seasonality? Not so much like a season of the calendar, but a day of the week, a peak season, a tourist season, balancing that.
Yeah, so one of the benefits of going, if you go to a paid park system like has been presented tonight, the flexibility of it. The flexibility can be turned on, it can be turned off. So again, you're looking at proper signage would be key. But absolutely, everything being said tonight is within play and within consideration. And so nothing has been set in stone. Nothing has been set in stone. So yeah, again, council's hearing this feedback of seasonality, days of the weeks, months, hours, that type of thing. Absolutely. Who has not asked a question? I want to make sure in the pink.
I'm Jamie Dixie out of Illinois Circle. So if there is no vote on this by the residents, the appropriate way to express your opinion about this or your vote about this would be to contact the council members? individually or?
Absolutely, anytime and on any topic. So your 5 council members and the mayor work for the town just like we work for the council as staff members, and we work for the residents and the visitors. So anytime you would like to contact the town or the town council, absolutely. Via email is probably the most appropriate way and most efficient way to do that. But that's always an option on any topic. And this town normally does a pretty good job of providing feedback on most topics. So that is absolutely an option, and always is an option to provide feedback. Again, on our website, if you go to our town website, all those email addresses are readily available, easily to find.
Jeanette West, we live on Western Drive. I just have a question about the size in terms of the number of spaces in the parking deck being proposed. We do have, our town's only so big, and 600 spaces could be 600 to 1,800 more people all at one time. So I'm curious about managing that.
Again, the 200 space that we used was just a projection to give some cost numbers, some relevancy of what it costs to build a parking deck. So currently today, a parking deck costs about $65,000 per space to construct. So that is the current cost that was just put through the bid process 8 miles away. So the 200 space we put out there is not set in stone by any means. Roger Brooks's presentation, again, was not set in stone. He utilized, I think, the number of spaces we have along with the employees that we have to come up with a number of 600 to say that we need 600 additional spaces to be able to accommodate what we're currently dealing with right now. Those are numbers, again. We don't have anything that has even spent $1 on the planning phase of what a parking structure would look like. We do have property that we own. We do have some opportunities potentially to partner as well. The footprint of those parcels will dictate what's allowed or not allowed. So just like the parking deck that's next door to us here is around 90 spaces because that's the footprint within that. So, don't want to get hung up again on the numbers of what that would look like, just given the fact we don't know where that would go, and where that would go really determines on how large of a structure. And then again, potential revenue from paid parking would also help dictate how much money we're willing to spend or how much money we're willing to spend for a parking structure. So numbers, again, were given during the study. Our numbers were for 200 spaces was just a good baseline to tell you that's about $13 million in today's dollars for construction. I think Emily had her hand up first.
I just had a quick follow-up. I do appreciate, like everyone said, that we did have this meeting to be able to get questions answered. It sounded like a sticker option was not so good because of the license plate. Have you taken into consideration the number of golf carts and things like that come into town or parking spots that don't have license plates?
That's absolutely come up. Many of the golf carts do have license plates. The golf carts that don't have license plates have to be permitted through the town. So one of the things that we've looked at is rather than putting a sticker on the golf cart windshield, we could assign a plastic plate, license plate for the golf cart rather than a sticker.
But UTVs and stuff can drive on the road just with farm vehicle things, just like the.
They have to have a license plate.
The town of Rock vehicles don't.
They have a town permit. They have to have a license plate, or they have to have a town of Blowing Rock permit. You cannot drive them on the streets of Blowing Rock without one of those two options. Yes.
Just a question about beautification of Blowing Rock's village. I understand we're doing, underground this so that we can make a nice, straight, beautiful site by Hallmark Channel Village. What are all these signages you keep talking about that's going to make for beautification of Blowing Rock and then these parking kiosk things? How does that help us?
Not tonight's topic, but underground utilities has not yet been determined, so I will definitely throw that out. That is, that's probably our next meeting of topics, but underground utilities has not been determined. So the Main Street project, the water, sewer, and sidewalk piece have been. So just to make sure I clarify that for everybody thinks. So we have not decided that. The signage that we have now, the 3-hour parking signs, if you can imagine, we've got the 4x4 post and then the 3-hour parking signs. Our plan is just to replace those. So we're replacing exact same footprint, so to speak, of the 3-hour parking signs with new signage within that. So we're not looking to add some additional signage. I will say, however, we are going through, with a partnership with the TDA, new wayfinding signage, both vehicular and pedestrian signage, which is much needed. And so we've got a lot of signage right now that does not necessarily make sense. Some of it's outdated, some's dilapidated. So we are looking at complete renovations of our wayfinding signage as well. And we're well along that process and hope to have something by this summer, kind of in the works with some of our vehicular and wayfinding pedestrian signage, confidence markers, things of that nature. So we're hoping to actually streamline from a beautification standpoint what those look like. Right now, we've got a little bit of hodgepodge of different signage. So we are hoping to make that a little bit more uniform.
So will that zoning sign you were talking about, and how do I get to my kiosk?
Yes.
Is that gonna be?
That would be, we would replace the 3-hour parking signs with those
So it's gonna all be on
zone
that
signs.
Absolutely.
Same post, different sign. Yeah.
Other questions?
Well, I just had another thought on, because I know you said your revenue projections were based off of Tracy, or like TDA's occupancy rates. Were the day trippers factored in here? Because we also have, I guess, Tracy, don't we have a large amount of day trippers coming from, that don't stay the night, that aren't factored in the occupancy rate, I guess?
Yeah, and so we can do this a number of different ways. So if you want to, and maybe this is the clearest way, maybe what we did was confuse people, and we don't want to do that by any means. So if we charge $2 an hour for 8 hours a day, obviously that's $16 a day. What we try to use is some percentage to give us a baseline. We've looked at things, differently from a break-even standpoint. So someone mentioned earlier about a pro forma. So what would it take if we charged what we're proposing to break even to cover the cost? That's about 22%. So if you look at a parking space in front of any store or on any street, if that parking space is being charged 8 hours, just 8 hours. Again, we're not talking 24 because we're not proposing 24. If we're saying we're charging for 8 hours, it needs to be filled 22% of that 8 hours in order to break even on the cost. Everything above that is really getting into potential revenue that could be offsetting. So I did not state that earlier. Maybe that's a better way to look at it from a pro forma standpoint. A break even is, we'll say a quarter. We'll say a quarter of the time. If you're charging 8 hours and you're getting 2 hours of that filled, that's a break even point. The other 6 hours of that 8 hours essentially is adding to that revenue. So I didn't state that earlier, but that's probably a better way to clarify. We use the TDA numbers again, just for a baseline, but we have within a pro forma looked at what a break even would look like to be able to cover the cost of enforcement, administration, et cetera. So break even is about a quarter of the time that we would charge. So I will wrap up by just saying, thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate, like we always do, the feedback that we get. That's the purpose of tonight. So again, nothing has been set in stone, nothing has been voted on it. Council was looking to gather feedback. That's the instructions they gave us a couple months ago, is to have a town hall meeting to gather feedback. And I think that's exactly what we've done tonight, is gather some feedback for them to consider. Again, we're not talking anything in the next several months of implementation. Our next steps will be to present to town council an update from this proposal at their time, at their discretion, and then they can move forward as they choose to do so. So we appreciate everyone coming out tonight and providing the feedback that you have.